A little world of mud. Ruskin Bond grew up in Dehradun, Shimla and Jamnagar. His stories and novels are popular across all age groups. His immensely enjoyable writing style and a refreshing take on ordinary happenings and people is what sets him apart. He makes you fall in love with nature and animals. Read this interesting account of a whole new world discovered by young Ruskin in a pond, his friendship with Ramu and respect for animals. I had never thought there was much to be found in the rainwater pond behind our bungalow in North India, except for quantities of mud and the occasional water buffalo. It was my grandfather who introduced me to the pond's diverse life, so beautifully arranged that each occupant gained some benefit from the well being of the others. To the inhabitants of the pond was the world, and to the inhabitants of the world, commented grandfather, the world was just a muddy pond. When grandfather first showed me the pond world, he chose a dry place in the shade of an old peepal tree, where was sat for an hour, gazing steadily at the thin green smile on the water. The buffaloes had not arrived for their afternoon dip, and the surface of the pond was undisturbed. For the first 10 minutes we saw nothing. Then a small black blob appeared in the middle of the pond. Gradually it rose higher, until at last we could make out a frog's head, its big eyes staring hard at us. The frog did not know if we were friends or enemies, so he kept his body out of sight. A heron, his mortal enemy, might have been wading about in search of a meal. When Mr. Frog had made sure that we were not herons, he passed his information on to his friends and neighbors, and very soon there were a number of big heads and eyes on the surface of the water. Throats swelled. We were treated to a chorus that went work, work, work. In the shallow water near the tree, we could see a dark shifting shadow. When I touched it with the end of a stick, the dark mass immediately became alive. Thousands of little black tadpoles wriggled into life, pushing and hustling each other. What do tadpoles eat? I asked. They eat one another most of the time, said grandfather. It may seem an unpleasant custom, but if all the young tadpoles in this pond grew into frogs, they would take up every inch of the ground between here and the house, and they had be all over the bedrooms and the bathrooms and the kitchen. Your grandmother would not be too pleased. Their croaking would drive her crazy. Grandfather told me that when he was a young man, he had once brought home a number of green tree frogs. He put them in a glass jar and left them on a window sill without telling anyone of their presence. At about 4 in the morning, the entire household was awakened by a loud and fearful noise. Grandmother and other members of the household gathered on the veranda for safety. Their fear turned to outrage when they discovered the source of all the noise. At the first glimmer of dawn, the frogs had, with one accord, burst into a song. Grandmother wanted them thrown out of the window. But grandfather gave the bottle a good shaking, and that quietened them for some time. Everyone went back to sleep, but grandfather was obliged to stay awake in order to shake the bottle whenever the frogs showed signs of bursting into a song. The following day, one of grandfather's aunts took the cover off the bottle to see what was inside. The sight of a dozen green tree frogs so frightened her that she ran off without replacing the cover. The frogs jumped out and got loose in the garden and were never seen again. But to return to the pond, I soon got into the habit of visiting it on my own, to explore its banks and shadows. Taking off my shoes, I would wade into the muddy water up to my knees to pluck the water lilies off the surface. One day, when I arrived at the pond, I found it already occupied by buffaloes. Their owner, a boy little older than me, was swimming in the middle of the pond. Instead of climbing out in the bank, he would pull himself up on the back of one one of his buffaloes, stretching his slim brown body out on the animal's glistening back. When he saw me staring at him from across the pond, he smiled, showing gleaming white teeth in his dark, sun-bronzed face. He invited me to join him for a swim. I told him I could not swim, and he offered to teach me. He dived off the back of the buffalo and swam across to me, and I, having removed my shirt and trousers, followed his instructions until I was struggling about among the water lilies. The boy's name was Ramu. He promised to give me swimming lessons every afternoon. Before long, I was able to swim across the pond to join Ramu astride a contented, basking buffalo. Ramu came from a family of milk vendors and had received a little schooling, but he was well versed in folklore and knew a great deal about birds and animals. I liked the buffaloes too. Sometimes we tried racing them, sitting astride different buffaloes, but they were lazy animals and would leave one comfortable spot only to look for another, or if they were in no mood for hectic activity, they would roll over in the water, depositing us into the mud and green slime of the pond. Emerging from the pond in shades of green and brown, I would slip into the house through the back door to avoid grandmother's wrath, then hurriedly bath under a tap before getting into my clothes. Sitting on our favorite buffalo, Ramu and I watched a pair of sarus cranes prancing around each other. They were tall, stork-like birds with naked red heads and long red legs. These birds are devoted companions, and it is said that if a sarus is killed, its mate will haunt the scene for weeks, calling sadly and sometimes even pining away and dying of grief. They are held in great affection by the village folk and will often adopt a village living on its outskirts. They are also as good as watchdogs, giving loud trumpet like calls if strangers approach. This particular pair of sarus cranes seemed to have adopted our pond and bungalow, for We were to see them often in the coming months. Many birds are sacred, he told me as a blue jay swooped down from the peepal tree and carried off a grasshopper. Ramu said that both the blue jay and the god Shiva are called Nilkantha. Shiva has a blue throat like the bird because out of compassion for the human race, he had swallowed a deadly poison that was meant to destroy the world. Keeping the poison in his throat, he had not let it go further. Both grandfather and Ramu felt that people should be more gentle with birds and animals and not kill them for sport or commerce. It is also important that we respect them, said grandfather. We must acknowledge their rights on the earth. Everywhere, birds and animals were finding it more difficult to survive because we are destroying their forest. They have to keep moving as the trees disappear. Ramu and I spent many long summer afternoons at the pond. We never saw each other again after I left my grandparents' house. He could not read or write, so we were unable to keep in touch. The buffaloes and the frogs and the sarus cranes shared our friendship. They had accepted us as part of their own world, their muddy but comfortable pond. Glossary: slime, green layer on water. Heron, a large water bird. Mortal, deadly. Hustling, pushing. Outrage, anger. Accord, being in agreement. Glimmer, faint light. Oblique, forced. Gleaming, shining. Astride, one leg on each side. Basking, exposing self to comfortable warmth. Well versed, knowledgeable. Depositing, throwing. Wrath, extreme anger. Swoop, jump. Commerce, business.